Did you guys know there already were great modelers around before Neural DSP dropped the Quad Cortex? I'm not trying to be snarky. This is a genuine question I've been asking myself lately because there's been so many interactions that I've had in the last year at gigs, jams, or just through social media in general, where a lot of people don't really seem to know. They seem to think that the technology pre 2021 was just not there. And I guess it was not worth comparing to a real amp. I mean, I don't blame them. Hey, Neural DSP has great marketing. The product itself is really great. I mean, I have one right here myself. And there's definitely been a lot of people who've been dipping their toes into this whole thing through Neural, maybe first through their plugins and then the actual device itself. If your answer to my question was yes, and you didn't just close this video, then you're probably familiar with this. But for those who are not, let me tell you a bit about Fractal Audio and the AX8. Fractal did not invent that modeling either, but according to many, they are the ones responsible for taking it to where it's at today. The AX8, their flagship product, has consistently been, through its multiple iterations, the most powerful effects and amp modeling processing unit available. The first one came out in 2006 with the AX8 Standard, and they've been on the AX8 cycle for the last couple of years. I actually owned the very first Mark I of the AX8, and I really liked it, but I ended up selling it, although I'll talk about that at some other time. Around 2015-2016, when Fractal released their Quantum firmware update, which vastly improved how their amps felt and sounded, we started seeing a lot of high-profile artists switch over to the AX8 from their analog or digital rigs. It really seemed like they had found something special. The effects were amazing, the feel and response was unmatched, and the recreations of these amps and pedal circuits were so meticulous that it really stood out. I mean, Kemper and Line 6 were doing great stuff too back then, but it really seemed like Fractal were at the top of the game for a lot of people. I mean, when a band like Metallica, which has infinite money to bring anything they want with them on the road, switches to your product, I mean, it's got to be good. But the AX8 was not cheap. Regardless of any generation or model you're looking at, a brand new AX8 is always going to be well over $2,000 or euros. So when they came out with this thing in 2015, everybody went crazy. And the ripples of its release are still being felt today. I believe every single floor modeler unit has been influenced by this in some way or another, and probably every modeler, period. I'll read from Fractal Audio's wiki now. The AX8 is an all-in-one floor version of the AX8 designed for the gig musician. It differs from the AX8 in that it offers only one instance per preset of amp, cab, and some effects blocks. The DSPs used in the AX8 are far too costly and require exotic cooling that is not suitable for floor application. The AX8 covers the needs of 99% of performing guitar players. Now, why do I have this? Well, a friend and former bandmate was asking me for help selling this exact unit, because he wants to buy, you guessed it, a Quad Cortex. And at the same time that happened, my QC had to be sent in for repairs. So I asked him if he would be gracious enough to let me have it, to borrow it for upcoming gigs and to check it out before he sold it off. And he agreed to that. What's funny is that I actually worked on this very same unit right out of the box. I was there with him when he got it, and I built some presets for him. And I already had experience doing that because I was in another band whose guitar player was also using this, and I had also helped him program a couple different things. So I thought it'd be cool to do some sort of testing and comparison once my QC was back to see if I feel any different about this unit and if modeling has really evolved that much since 2015 or more like 2019 when this unit got its last update. I had to keep it simple for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't have that much more time left with this thing. I got to return it since I already got my QC repaired, and that was the whole point of me borrowing this in the first place. And number two, there's a limit to the number of effects blocks you can have on the AX8 because of its limited DSP. But having said that, the effects themselves are both amazing, both units. It would have been cool to try to dial in a super complex preset on both of these and see how much further you can push the Quad Cortex in this. But there already are great videos on that subject on YouTube, so you can just go check them out if you're really interested in this thing. I decided to focus on the amp emulation exclusively, and for that purpose, I chose 3 amps that I'm quite familiar with: the Wagner Shiba, the Marshall Plexi, and the AVH 5153 on its blue channel. I'll be using the same settings and the same IRs for all 3 amps on both units, and then I'll share my thoughts. Before I move on to the VH, let me explain something. I actually own an EVH 5153 and a Zilla Fatboy cab, which is the cab that I have on both of these presets. And like I said, I worked on this exact same AX8 unit, and I managed to find a preset that is a replica of the one that I had in my QC, which in turn was, of course, based on my actual rig, my real amp and cab. I wanted us to have a consistent tone because we were playing in a band together, and I tried to approximate both these presets to sound as close as possible within the limitations that both devices had. And since I had already made the preset on the QC with a precision drive that is not available on the AX8, I guess I chose an MXR micro boost on the AX8. That's probably the one that came the closest. I don't really know why. I don't remember what I did, but it's going to be interesting to hear both of them and see how they compare. So there you go. Not the most in-depth, tone test comparison. But if you really want to look at both of these units individually, there's tons of videos online already. I'm really curious to see what you guys think about this as far as how they sounded, when compared to one another. If you do have any opinions you'd like to share, please type them down below in the comments now before I give my opinion. Pause the video, please. I don't want to bias anybody, and I'm genuinely very curious about what people think about this stuff, because I was really hoping that I wouldn't feel, and I mean feel and not hear, that's a big distinction right there, that there was such a big difference between the Quad Cortex and the AX8. I mean, the AX8 sounds great, but there's this stiffness to it when compared to the Quad Cortex. There's less dynamic range, and when you look at the overdrives and the distortion in general, there's less harmonic content. I remember the AX8 sounding and feeling amazing, and it does really sound and feel amazing. It's just that the standards are different, and that's all there is to it. That being said, I'm not really sure if we've progressed that much since 2019 when the AX8 got its last update, because seriously, this thing sounds amazing. And keep in mind, this has the exact same software that the XFX, which was the peak back then, was using. So if you were to compare this to most things today, it would do very well. It would do fairly well, especially if you're not taking into account feel. I mean, the tones are still fantastic. I think it really comes down to how my frame of reference has shifted in the last 4 years since I last played it. And, I plug into the QC every day. And so, now I'm used to that. But also at the same time, I did get the QC shortly after selling my XFX3. And I do remember the XFX3 sounding and feeling a tad bit better than the AX8. And this was 2020. So, of course, they've come out with new firmware updates and they're always improving. So, I mean, I haven't played through an FM9 or an FM3 or an XFX3 in a long time, which are both, on the same firmware. But I do remember feeling that there was also an improvement on that front. So honestly, if you're just talking about tones and you're not taking into account other features like USB audio or, certain cons that I'll talk about now, I don't know if it makes much sense to part with the AX8, especially if you're price sensitive. This thing has a lot of value still. That being said, I do want to talk a bit about the cons of this unit in case you're interested in picking one of these up used, which, you know, if you find one for $600 to $700 or dollars, I think that's a great bang for your buck, especially if you already have a main rig and you need a backup, or if you're someone who has never really gotten into modeling at all and you want to buy something that is not super expensive, but it's also not a toy and it's actually going to give you usable tones. This is definitely a great pick. But yeah, let's just get right into it. So I would say that the controls are not the most intuitive. It takes a bit getting used to how the menus work. Having said that, once you do have that, you have like your scene switching and your bank up and down, and all that stuff is pretty universal across most devices of this kind these days. So if you're familiar with some of that, you won't really have a problem. One issue a lot of people might have with this is that it only has the one input. If you're really just using this for like a live rig situation, then you would be absolutely fine. Not having USB audio is a bummer. You do have a USB input, but it's only to edit on the AX8 Edit, which, by the way, is the way to go with this thing. I mean, I did mention that the controls are a bit of a hassle, but most of us would use this with just that edit. You know, you pull up your PC or your MacBook or whatever, and you just edit everything on there, and you just save your presets and your scenes, and then, you know, just go out and gig it. Not having USB audio might be a bit of a problem if you want to use this as a sort of like portable home studio, which a lot of us do with our modelers these days, because I think all of them can do that, or most of them. Like I said earlier, it's got limited DSP, but Fractal Audio themselves said this is what most people would need for any live rig situation. You know, this is what 99% of guitar players everywhere are going to need for a live show, and I completely agree. And finally, the last con I can think of is that it's obviously no longer supported. It's been discontinued. That's the whole point of buying it cheap used. That's why this might be an interesting pick for you. To wrap this up while I'm on the topic, let me say that, in my opinion, Kemper, the old Helix stuff, Tone X, Headrush, they all work great. They all sound great, and they will all do a great job if you pick one of those up, because everything sounds great in 2025. I made this video because I was worried that we might have gotten a bit too used to the endless cycle of constantly upgrading our devices, just as we've gotten used to doing that with phones and laptops, and how much of that these things have in common with that now. I know people who are happily gigging their Kempers or their AX8s, in fact, and no one is walking up to them or sending them a DM on Instagram and going, hey man, you sound great, but you really need to upgrade that modeler. This stuff got really good a while ago. So the next time you decide you want to upgrade your modeler, take a minute to compare what it is that you have to what you want, and consider what features or functionalities you don't have in your current modeler. And for the love of everything that you hold sacred, don't buy one of these things as soon as they come out. I speak from experience. That's going to be it for this one, guys. If you found this interesting, consider subscribing and leaving me your thoughts down below. I'm really eager to see what you guys think about all this stuff and how modeling has evolved through the years. I do a lot of things with production and gear and reviews and my own music. So if you're interested in any of that, do check it out. It really does help me out a lot, and it's a big part of being a musician in 2025, honestly. So yeah, I would appreciate that. Big thanks to Javier for letting me borrow his AX8 for this stuff. If it's still being sold and you're interested, there will be a link down below if I don't drop it. And other than that, I'll see you in the next one.